All right, welcome. Hello, friends. This is our first event of this semester. It's the opening of We Are Each Other's Harvest, Gwendolyn Brooks and the Formation of Black Literary Canon. My name is Kate Coker. I'm the Associate Head of the RBML and one of the curators of this exhibit. And I am so happy that we are all gathered here today, so thank you for coming. We are thrilled to have Miss Brooks's daughter, Nora Brooks Blakely, here with us, live and in person. And she'll be talking about the 75th anniversary of the publication of Annie Allen, which was the first book by a Black author to win the Pulitzer Prize in 1950. Before we get started, we would like to note that it is a land-grant institution. The University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign has a responsibility to acknowledge the historical context in which it exists. In order to remind ourselves in our community, we will begin this event with the following statement. We are currently on the lands of the Peoria, the Kaskaskia, the Piankashaw, the Wea, the Miami, the Mascoutin, the Odawa, the Sauk, the Meskwaki, the Kickapoo, the Potawatomi, the Ojibwe, and the Chickasaw nations. It is necessary for us to acknowledge these Native nations and for us to work with them as we move forward as an institution. Over the next 150 years, we will be a vibrant community inclusive of all of our differences, with Native peoples at the core of our efforts. As I hope is clear from our exhibit today, we also consider the reclamation, documentation, and stewardship of historical and literary materials the core mission of the RBML, as well as ensuring their accessibility to the public. Events like these are a major part of our work, but so are the classes that we teach and the everyday tasks of ensuring our patrons and visitors are assisted with the information that they need. I'd like to thank everyone in the RBML for the care and efforts that made today possible. Our head, Lynn Thomas, is unable to join us today, so I pass on her acknowledgments. Thank you to Ana D. Rodriguez and Marco Valadares Perez for their work in installing this exhibit. Thank you to Chloe Ottenhoff for her work in designing the exhibit labels and the gorgeous catalog I hope everyone got a copy of this afternoon. Thanks to the rest of the exhibit curatorial team, Caroline Silowich and Dana Miller, for their work in collecting materials and endless proofreading. Thanks also go to Carrie Lingscheit, who arranges these events so seamlessly, and to Tony Hines and Molly Banwart, who are responsible for the retrieval of the materials we all looked at during the selection process. Thanks also to Nicole Connell, who worked with Dana and Ruth Ann Mowry on collection processing and making the Brooks Finding Aid available to the public. We would also like to thank Rachel Johns of Digitization Services, who with Anna assisted in providing the digitization of materials for the exhibit, the catalog, and the digital library. And finally, thank you to all of the student workers, folks in the back, whose invisible labors of pulling and reshelving materials makes everything we do possible every single day. We would like to note that portions of this exhibition and its programming were funded through the W. Peter and Joan McFarland Hood University Library Endowment Fund, the Terrence M. Deneen Library Endowment Fund, and the Robert B. Downs Publications Fund. We are so very grateful to them and to all the donors who make our work possible. And I would like to now introduce our Dean, Claire Stewart, who will say a few words.
Thank you, Kate. Can you hear me?
Okay. You gotta talk right into it.
Gotta talk right into it to focus myself. So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the Rare Book and Manuscript Library. It is really a pleasure to have so many of you with us here today as we celebrate the opening of this exceptional exhibit. And I'd also like to add my very warm welcome to Nora, to Ms. Brooks' daughter. Nora, we're very grateful that you're here with us and looking forward to hearing from you this afternoon. Gwendolyn Brooks's works are a towering achievement and presence in American poetry. Many of us, I hope, remember when we first encountered her works. On a personal note, my first exposure came when I met my now husband, Christopher, in Chicago in the mid-90s when he was serving on the board of the Guild Complex, which was is still a literary arts organization that hosts the Gwendolyn Brooks Open Mic Award, which is also celebrating an anniversary this year. It's having its 30th anniversary, and I think the fact that Ms. Brooks lent her name to that activity that is really the present and future of our literary canon is so powerful, and another thing for us to celebrate. And when I learned that the Gwendolyn Brooks Archive was here in Illinois, I was even more excited about coming to be dean here. And my colleagues and I are so proud and so humbled to house her archive here at our university. We are also very delighted to share that there is a new edition of Brooks's second book, Annie Allen, the work, as Chloe said, that was awarded the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. And we have, I think, some early copies available for purchase today here, thanks to our partnership with the Illini Union bookstore. And it really is surprising, isn't it, that such a landmark work in the history of American letters is only now being reprinted in its own right rather than as part of a collection of other works. So another reason for us to be celebrating today. This exhibit offers a rare and deeply meaningful look into the history of Black literature. The works on display are drawn from 200 years of Black letters, from the origin point of Phyllis Wheatley to the stars of the Harlem Renaissance to Kevin Young of the Smithsonian Museum and the New Yorker. Gwendolyn Brooks's poetry is a bridge between the literary heritage of yesterday, the poets of today, and the voices of tomorrow. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. This line from Gwendolyn Brooks's poem, Paul Robeson, serves as the inspiration for this exhibit and reminds us that we are bound together by our shared history. The creative legacy we celebrate today is truly one of interconnectedness, of community, and of profound impact. So I want to turn things back over to Kate, but I would also like to add to her thanks my own to the curators, the faculty, the staff and student workers who made this exhibit as possible, as well as to the Brooks estate for their ongoing support. And I want to thank all of you for being here and for joining us in this celebration of literature, history, and the enduring legacy of Gwendolyn Brooks. I hope you are able to spend time with the exhibit and come back and visit us again and again, hopefully over the time that the exhibit is up. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to you, Kate.
Thank you, Claire. I'd now like to introduce our special guest, Nora Brooks Blakely. Nora is a literary editor and agent and the president of Brooks Permissions, who makes all things pertaining to the preservation of Gwendolyn Brooks' literary legacy possible. She's appeared in multiple documentaries pertaining to the history of Chicago and the Black Arts Movement, and she also has an absolute slammin' sense of music. We were talking about African rock like way too long last night, but I cannot say that about everyone, so you're awesome. So we are so happy that you are here today, and the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you. Let me get myself situated up here for a minute, and also to make sure you can everyone hear me? Okay. I was in theater for over 3 decades, so I should just be able to project. But we're gonna go with the mic. So, I want to thank everybody for coming and all the wonderful, kind treatment that I've had since I've been here. I love coming back to RBML. Everybody is just so doggone cool. And they also take me great places to eat too, so that's, also a wonderful thing. So, let me say. So, first of all, I just wanted to say, whee! That I'm celebrating with glee the Rare Book and Manuscript Libraries exhibition on Gwendolyn Brooks and the formation of the Black literary canon. I wanted to do a little canonifying of my own, and because, as you've heard, next Tuesday, October 1st, will be the 75th anniversary of the publication of Annie Allen, my mother's Pulitzer Prize winning book. Brooks Permissions is spearheading the Annie Allen 75 celebration. So that's irritating me. which begins, can everyone hear me? Great, okay. Which begins October 1st and wraps up May 1st of next year, 75 years to the day that she received the Pulitzer Prize. And so we've just been going around saying that from October 1st to May 1st, that we just wanted to party like it's 1999. So, but before we get into all of that, I wanted to be sure that everybody is starting on the same page. And since you're here, I do believe that most of you have some answers at least to my first self-imposed question. And that is, who is Gwendolyn Brooks? First of all, you need to know that she was born in Topeka, Kansas, if you don't already know that, on June 7th of 1917. What you may not know is that she is not part of the Great Migration, because people usually talk about her coming from moving from Kansas, but she did not move from Kansas. Her mother, Keziah Wims, wanted to be with her mother when she had her first child. But she and my grandfather already lived in Chicago. They had been here for years. So she just went down to Kansas, had the baby, and about 5 weeks later, everybody trotted on back to their home in Chicago. So that is an ongoing thing that I'm doing with everybody. That is like, because people say, oh, she was part of the Great Migration. No. So that was one piece. She was, as has been said many times, the first Black person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize. And I phrase it that way because some people say the first poet, the first woman. No. She was the first Black person of any stripe to ever win the Pulitzer Prize in any category. There are now 23 categories. There weren't that many at that time, but yes. So the first Black person to ever win the Pulitzer Prize. She was not only an author, she was also an editor, and though she primarily wrote poetry for adults and children, she also developed anthologies and wrote 1 novel and 2 autobiographies. So, while her work was mostly focused on the urban Black experience, sometimes people decide that that was all that she wrote about, and that is not the case. She also addressed social and global issues with, in my estimation, and that of many others, with precision and power. She received 70 honorary degrees. I want to take a minute to say that in previous years, we were trying to figure out how many degrees there were. So was it 50? Was it 75? Should we just say 25? Should we just say 25 and more so that we weren't guilty of overselling? We weren't sure. But thanks to, this is an unpaid for joy and celebration of Dana Miller and the rest of the RBML staff, we now, because of their incredible and meticulous work, we now know that it was exactly 70 degrees. And we even have a list of the 70 institutions that gave her those degrees. So, whoop whoop, RBML. Okay. So another GB fact, Poet Laureate of Illinois for over 30 years. And since now most Poet Laureates are brought in according to a particular term, I'm pretty sure that 30 plus years is never going to be beaten. So she also created and sponsored countless awards, including the Illinois Poet Laureate Awards. But she also did awards at school. She would get excited and would just on the spot decide I'm going to do a contest. I'm going to do an award. And my father started calling her Our Lady of the Open Mouth because she would just jump up and get all excited about it and do that. But the Illinois Poet Laureate Awards, the governor at the time, Governor Kerner, she asked him, well, what am I responsible for if I am the poet laureate? And he said, your responsibilities will be commensurate with your pay, which was nothing. So she was, that wasn't who my mother was. She couldn't do that. And so she came up with the concept of doing the Poet Laureate Awards for young people from kindergarten through high school seniors. But the wonderful thing is that a while back, with the support of the Poetry Foundation, Illinois Humanities came to me about continuing the awards. And they are now the Gwendolyn Brooks Youth Poetry Awards. We just had the celebration of the 8th annual awards, the September 14th. And we were amazed by the fact that we now had over 900 submissions to the contest from across the state of Illinois. So we're very proud of that. So whoop whoop GBYPA! Okay. Two last GB facts. She served as the poetry consultant for the Library of Congress from 1985 to 1986. The only thing that bugs me just a little bit is that not too long after that, they changed the name from poetry consultant to U.S. Poet Laureate. So it was like, but there you go. So she is also the namesake for at least 5 schools. I've heard of 2 more, but I haven't been able to track them down. She also, if you've ever been to Springfield and have seen the Illinois State Library building, which is now the Gwendolyn Brooks Illinois State Library building because they changed the name in 2003, but you will see her name carved in the stone up at the top of the building. And that happened before she passed. And my mother was not a crier. I'm a crier. When Robin Hood gets made Marian, tears are streaming down my face. But she was not a crier. But you could see that how this had just actually just punched her, you know, in the gut, a happy punch. That her name was carved in stone. You know, and so that was something that was really incredible to her. So here's my next point to ponder. For those of you who don't know, it's what's a Pulitzer? It's a prize that began in 1917, the same year my mother was born. In fact, it's a whole bunch of prizes. A newspaper publisher named Joseph Pulitzer left money in his will to Columbia University to create a journalism school and to create this prize. The Pulitzer Prize is considered to be the highest national honor you can receive in journalism, literature, or musical composition. Okay, so now, I think we're all on the same page. We're all moving forward, and that brings us to Annie Allen. Annie Allen was published by Harper & Brothers. They've gone through several name changes, but that's what they were named at the time. October 1, 1949. Here, in Gwendolyn Brooks' second book, we learn about the life of this young black woman from birth and into womanhood. Annie weaves her way through a difficult world as she grows into adulthood, facing poverty, marriage, racial discrimination, and war, and somehow hope. So, those are the basics of poet, publication, and Pulitzer. Now that everyone's up to speed, as I said, I think it's important to understand why it's so important to celebrate this writer and this book. For some people, 75 years would be reason enough to celebrate, but just in case you're not one of those people, I'm happy to explain. Visibility. My mother was one of the most anti-visible people on the planet. She wasn't fond of pictures. In fact, at one point, she went through the family album and cut her face out of all the pictures that she didn't like. And she really didn't like video. I believe there are fewer than 10 videos of any substance in the world that capture her, that feature her. And this is why other great writers like Toni Morrison and Maya Angelou have so much more visibility. So I'm planning to fix this problem. My goal is a small one. On May 2nd, the day after this celebration ends, I want people all over the world to know who Michael Jordan is, who Beyonce is, and who Gwendolyn Brooks is. There's one more reason to celebrate. My mother made the ordinary extraordinary. I have met so many writers who said that after reading the work of Gwendolyn Brooks, they realized they could write about anything in their lives and in the world around them. They did not have to be confined to nature with a capital N, or poetry about urns, or great battles, or towering sculptures and edifices. To help generations of poets understand and utilize the fact that they and their communities are extraordinary, that is worthy of celebration. So, back to Annie Allen. Except for the tribute poem to Ed Bland, this book begins with a birth. The first two lines in the poem, The Birth in a Narrow Room, are, "Weeps out of Western country, something new, blurred and stupendous, wanted and unplanned. Annie has arrived." And novelist Sandra Jackson Opoku gives us her context. She said, with the Montgomery bus boycott and Martin Luther King's rise to prominence just a few years away, the Jim Crow South would soon erupt into the civil rights movement. Jackson Opoku tells us blacks are engaged in their own fight for equal opportunities in housing, employment, education, and political power. With white women's social, legal, and reproductive rights severely constrained, conditions for black women are that much more dire. Those dire conditions began before Annie and continued long past her heyday, which is why it is so important to see her and her environs as part of a women's club, so to speak, created by GB. A club filled with the voices and visions of dry long-sew women. Dry long-sew is a term for ordinary black folk, or as John Langston Gwaltney defines it in his book of the same name, core black people, the ordinary men and women who make up Black America. Hopefully, this will give you a little insight into the crisscrossery of my mother's work. Starting with a poem from Annie Allen. It's from the perspective of a woman in a car with her husband as they drive through a neighborhood that is definitely not their own. It's called Beverly Hills, Chicago. And the epigraph is, "And the people live till they have white hair," by E.M. Price. The dry brown coughing beneath their feet, only a while, for the handyman is on his way. These people walk their golden gardens. We say ourselves fortunate to be driving by today, that we may look at them in their gardens where the summer ripeness rots, but not raggedly. Even the leaves fall down in lovelier patterns here. And the refuse is a neat brilliancy. When they flow sweetly into their houses with softness and slowness, touched by that everlasting gold, we know what they go to tea. But that does not mean they will throw some little black dots into some water and add sugar and the juice of the cheapest lemons that are sold. While downstairs, that woman's vague phonograph bleats, "Knock me a kiss," and the living all to be made again in the sweatingest physical manner tomorrow. Not that anybody is saying that these people have no trouble, merely that it is trouble with a gold-flecked, beautiful banner. Nobody is saying that these people do not ultimately cease to be, and sometimes their passings are even more painful than ours. It is just that so often they live till their hair is white. They make excellent corpses among the expensive flowers. Nobody is furious. Nobody hates these people, at least nobody driving by in this car. It is only natural, however, that it should occur to us how much more fortunate they are than we are. It is only natural that we should look and look at their wood and brick and stone and think, while a breath of pine blows, how different these are from our own. We do not want them to have less, but it is only natural that we should think we have not enough. We drive on. We drive on. When we speak to each other, our voices are a little gruff. And what is the reality of their not enough? It can be found in a poem from Mama's first book, A Street in Bronzeville. Kitchenette building. We are things of dry hours and the involuntary plan. Grayed in and gray, dream makes a giddy sound, not strong like rent, feeding a wife, satisfying a man. But could a dream send up through onion fumes its white and violet, fight with fried potatoes and yesterday's garbage ripening in the hall, flutter or sing an aria down these rooms? Even if we were willing to let it in, had time to warm it, keep it very clean, anticipate a message, let it begin? We wonder, but not well, not for a minute. Since number 5 is out of the bathroom now, we think of lukewarm water, hope to get in it. And I mentioned crisscrossery. And so the important thing, I think, is to be able to begin to see that whether it was Eddie Allen, A Street in Bronzeville, or this upcoming quote from Maud Martha, that there were themes that ran through her work. There were themes in her canon that she looked at and considered to be very important. And that is, and so here's this peek into the world of Maud Martha. That's GB's, I call her GB, I call her Mama, I call her Gwendolyn Brooks, it varies, only novel. And this snippet from the chapter on 34th Street. Maud Martha went east on 34th Street, headed for Cottage Grove. It was August and 34th Street was all in bloom. The blooms, in their undershirts, sundresses, and diapers, were hanging over porches and fence stiles and strollers, and were even bringing chairs out to the rims of the sidewalks. And I think that this 34th Street, although living 2 blocks away, 2 blocks down the street from the other books, that it could be right outside of that kitchenette building that was in the previous book that was in A Street in Bronzeville. And so of course, when you're reading the work of Gwendolyn Brooks, it's not just about passing by beautiful homes. It's not just about us as the audience seeing this world through a window, seeing them from seats in the audience. No, when you're reading the work of Gwendolyn Brooks, it's also about the heart-wrenching understandings spoken from the mouths of the people living on the streets. So you not only have somebody walking by beautiful Beverly Hills, Chicago, you not only have the people who are waiting to jump into the bathroom at the end of the hall, because that's how kitchenette buildings were constructed, where there were just 1 or 2 bathrooms on a hallway, and everybody on that hallway in these little tiny apartments had to wait their turn to get into that, to get into those bathrooms. You're also not just looking at the blooms on the street, which I love because you hear the blooms and you think, oh, maybe it's going to be a little collection of flowers or something, and the blooms are the actual people. But you don't hear just those. You also hear from the people who are specifically in their own voice identifying their lives, and so, or being referred to very directly. And so from her poem, An Old Black Woman, Homeless and Indistinct, when you rise in another morning, you hit the street, your incessant enemy. See, here you are in the so busy world. You walk, you walk, you pass the people. No, the people pass you. And all of those women think and fret and worry about their children and the young people to whom they are adjacent. Annie worries about her own children in the poem, The Children of the Poor. There are 5 sections to that poem. This is section 2. What shall I give my children who are poor, who are judged the least wise of the land, who are my sweetest lepers, who demand no velvet and no velvety velour, but who have begged me for a brisk contour, crying that they are quasi-contraband, because unfinished, graven by a hand less than angelic, admirable, or sure. My hand is stuffed with mode, design, device, but I lack access to my proper stone. And plenitude of plan shall not suffice, nor grief nor love shall be enough alone to ratify my little halves who bear across an autumn freezing everywhere. Or there's Bessie, who struggles with a decision. Big Bessie throws her son into the street. A day of sunny face and temper, the winter trees are musical. Bright lameness from my beautiful disease, you have your destiny to chip and eat. Be precise with something better than candles in the eyes. Candles are not enough. At the root of the will, a wild, inflammable stuff. New pioneer of days and ways, be gone. Hunt out your own or make your own alone. Go down the street. So you remember that, hopefully, that earlier I mentioned that, that a lot of people had categorized Gwendolyn Brooks as somebody who wrote specifically about her community, and that is undeniably true. But she had a lot of concerns in the world. And while we're talking about worrying about children, this one is called Thinking of Elizabeth Steinberg. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that story, but it's probably, I think it was the 80s, where this young child was brutally beaten. And this weighed so heavily on my mother that she wanted to write a poem. It is 80s, because the epigraph is Friday, November 13th, 1987. Already, you're on page 8. And in a while, your name will not be remembered by that large animal, the public general. I don't know who will remember you, Lisa, or consider the big fists breaking your little bones, or consider the vague bureaucrats stumbling, fumbling through paper. Your given name is my middle name, Elizabeth, but that is not why I am sick when I think of you. There, no one to help you in your private horror of monsters and fools. You are the world's little girl. And what is a little girl for? She is for putting a bow ribbon on. She is for paper dolls. She is for playmates and birthday parties. She is to love, She is to be precious, precious. She is for ice cream cones. She is not to be hurt. She is not to be pounded. Elizabeth, Lisa, we cannot help you. They wept at the wake in Redden's funeral home, among messages, bright gladiolas. There was weeping at your grave. Tardy tears will not return you to air. But if you are somewhere and sentient, be comforted, little spirit, because of your lean day, the vulgarity of your storm, the erosion and rot of your masters sitting in the sputum of their souls, another Lisa will not die. You help us begin to hear. We begin to hear the scream out of the twisted mouths and out of the eye that strives to be normal. We shall listen, listen. We shall stomp into the horror houses, invade the caves of the monsters, in the name of Elizabeth Steinberg, in the name of Lisa. So, I wanted to make sure that we addressed the messages that my mother leaves for the world. They are strewn across her entire canon. These recommendations, suggestions, commands, they are her conductions, new word, on how we, her readers, can or should step into the future. Examples from her later work: My people, black and black, revile the river, say that the river turns, and turn the river. We are each other's harvest. We are each other's business. We are each other's magnitude and bond. And I know it was said, but I wanted to say it again, because this is the poem, when people talk about the poem that she's probably best known for, We Real Cool, this is the poem because she herself said, and you can actually find this on YouTube, where she says, it's not that I don't like the poem, but she says that she would be happy if anthologists realized that she had written more than that one poem. And so Paul Robeson is, I have been on a crusade of Paul Robeson taking over for We Real Cool. That this message poetry is something that was also very important to her. And there is a phrase at the end of Annie Allen, the closing lines, which I love. And I believe that it's important to note that Annie Allen stands as one of the most complete and complex characters in the Brooks canon. And it's not just because of the breadth of this study, but also the depth of the connection we feel with her and her community. So before I give you that quote, I do want to say that Annie Allen is 75, that Books and Missions is doing this whole thing, as I mentioned earlier, and there are several components to it. One was that we put on our big girl pants and decided that we were going to actually publish a new edition of Annie Allen. But because you can find Annie Allen in different places, specifically in Blacks, we wanted to do a little bit more. So in this book, we have not only the original manuscript of Annie Allen, we also have tribute poems from the Illinois Poet Laureate Angela Jackson and from the Chicago Poet Laureate Avery R. Young. We also have in here, with the permission of the Pulitzer Prizes, the actual jury letter from the people who decided who would get the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1950. And it's very interesting, and it speaks once again to context, because you read it and as they're trying to decide, well, yes, this woman is good and she did that, and this other writer did that, but maybe we should give it to Robert Frost for the 4th time. So, but they decided not. And so that is also in here, as well as a foreword by Haki Matabuti, as well as an introduction by me, although I was beaten and forced into that. I really had not planned to put anything in this book. And several people were like, oh no, you're gonna put something in this book. And then 8 essays from different writers of different stripes. Sandra Jackson Opoku, who's mentioned, Tahimba Jess, who is a Pulitzer Prize awardee in poetry himself, Reggie Gibbons from known in poetry circles and also from his long time at Northwestern University, and different people did different things. And so I think that if you get the book, you're going to be really interested because they went all different places. They went to Tahimba's is on the Voot, and the music that was playing at the time. Adrian Mateka, who is the editor of Poetry Magazine, his piece is also on music, but how the music of the poetry and how it impacted his young daughter. You have several other different pieces, including one of my favorites because it is Annika Pfister, and she does the first reading of on the first reading of Annie Allen, and she said the first reading of Annie Allen can be confusing. It was confusing for me. When I began Annie Allen, I was glued to my cell phone for the entirety of Notes from the Childhood and the Girlhood, and a good chunk of the Ennead, desperately Googling definitions for paradisiacal, thaumaturgic, and hecatombs. First time reader, if you're anything like me, you'll want to know the definitions of everything. You'll search constantly for what Brooks meant and why she meant it. This is a trap. Read Annie Allen. Read and let yourself be swept away. Read and let yourself be confused. Let yourself sit in confusion and find as much meaning in it as you do in the moments of clarity. And I confess, as I have confessed many places, that the Ennead still makes my head hurt. That there are pieces in there where you are going, wait, what? What are you saying? And so it is perfectly acceptable to go in there multiple times and go, okay, I'm seeing this way now. No, wait, now I'm seeing it another way. And that's perfectly okay. So with that, I will leave you with the very last lines from Annie Allen. I believe, as I said, that Annie Allen, I think, stands as one of the most complete and complex characters in the Brooks canon. And as I was saying, not just because of the breadth of the study, but the connections that she makes us feel. And it's particularly interesting, these last few lines, because I have discovered that people have wildly different interpretations of them. And there are people that just don't like these lines. They think they're depressing. I find them invigorating. And so it'll be interesting to see which direction you each decide in your personal souls to go into. So after you have long survived the wild forest of interweave and introspection that is the Ennead, you've still got interpreting to do. Annie leaves us with this. Rise, let us combine. There are no magics or elves or timely godmothers to guide us. We are lost, must wizard a track through our own screaming weed. And could there be a time when our weed is screaming more than today? Thank you. there. This is one of the components. This is Living a Legacy as a global celebration of living Black female poets. And up through October 9th, if there are particular poets that fit into that category that you would like to nominate, you can do so, and there's a QR code on the bottom of it. And we got grief from the way that our submission form was originally, so now it's really easy. So it takes you about a minute or two. You have up to 5 poets to nominate, but you can just nominate 1 or 2. So I hope that you grab a card from the desk over there and send us some of these. Thank you.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes left. Are there any questions? You've stunned them into silence.
Crickets? Oh, come on.
Brave soul.
Oh, thank you. So my name is Oluwakemi Adeyemi, and I'm wondering what your mom would have said with regards to the Benin Bronzes, especially conversations around African Americans wanting to have a say with regards to their repatriation back to Nigeria.
Okay, my hearing is not that good.
He was asking what your mother would have to say about the Benin bronzes and the returning of them to Africa.
Oh, she would have been, that's an easy one. She would have been overjoyed. She would have been absolutely overjoyed.
Anyone else?
See, nobody bit him or anything. So.
Your mother is a poet. Did you inherit anything from her? Do you write poetry?
I inherited alliteration. That is one of my favorite things. I do write some poetry, but I do not consider myself a poet. It's accidental poetry when it happens. What I ended up doing was I went in a different direction besides teaching. I also went into dance and theater, mostly theater, and founded a company called Chocolate Chips Theater Company, which ran for 29 years. And it was adults who performed, but we performed for young people, and I was also the principal playwright. So I write plays and musicals. I have published just a year or so ago my first children's picture book, Moyenda and the Golden Heart, and I am basically a folklore junkie, and so I love doing things that take folklore and look at it from different directions.
Thank you.
You know, if we get a third question, we'll have good luck for the rest of the day. Oh, yes! Awesome!
When do you miss your mom the most?
Wow, nobody has ever asked that question. Good question.
Thank you.
All the time.
Yeah.
She passed in 2000, which is now in December, which is now going on, as of this December, 24 years. And some days that seems like 3,000 years ago, and other times it seems like it just happened. And there are still the times, for those of you who are fortunate to still have your mothers, there are still the times that I catch myself saying, oh, I gotta call mama and tell her, you know. So, and then we were also CBS Sunday morning fellow junkies. Sometimes we would watch it sometimes we would watch it together and just talk on the phone all the way through it. Other times we would just watch the first few minutes and get off and then watch it independently. But there are things that happen on CBS Sunday morning that I still want to chat with her about. There are things in the news, and y'all know what I'm talking about, that we would definitely have been on the phone talking about for hours. So yeah, a lot.
Yeah.
Do you want to go for 4? Are you ready to?
Yeah, that's a good question. 4, calling for 4. Well, if not, there will at least be time for people to talk among themselves. Nora's really nice. I swear she does not buy it. And please have snacks, talks amongst yourselves, take a look at the exhibit, and thanks everyone so much for coming.